Well, good morning and welcome to Plug In with Playbook. I'm Anna Palmer, co-author of the Politico Playbook. I'm joined by my co-author, Jake Sherman. Thank you for tuning in to Politico's virtual programming during the reimagined political conventions as we count down to Election Day. This week, it has been all about the Democratic National Convention and Joe Biden's campaign for president. You can follow the conversation all week on social media using the hashtag DNC with Politico and tweet us your questions at Politico.
In a moment, we'll be talking to Symone Sanders, senior advisor to the Biden campaign. But first, today's plug-in with Playbook will include a segment on the new swing states map hosted by senior politics editor Charlie Mahtesian and national political correspondent Natasha Korecki. Today's edition is about Wisconsin and why it's among the states that is likely to shape the electoral outcome here in just 75 days is Election Day. That will be followed by senior technology reporter Nancy Scola interviewing Caitlin Mitchell, senior advisor for digital for the Biden campaign.
All right, without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, Symone Sanders, to Plug In with Playbook.
Thank you. Great to be here. Good to see you all.
Well, you are coming off of three pretty big nights of conventions. Let's go look a little forward. What does Joe Biden need to do tonight, in your estimation?
Well, look, Vice President Biden tonight, this is his opportunity to, and you all have heard me say this before, speak directly to the American people about his vision. This is going to be very forward-looking. This is going to be about Joe Biden's plan for America. Really speak to this moment that we're in, but also how we can go forward.
You know, what we've heard, what we've continued to hear all along this convention, the one takeaway that seemingly everybody has is that they've gotten the sense that Joe Biden is a decent guy, a nice guy, honest guy. I think that must have been obviously a goal of yours. I mean, you guys are really leaning into this framing about Biden's character. Is that a correct takeaway from this convention that everyone's having?
I would say yes. Look, character is, I'm glad you got the point. Shout out to the communications team and the entire convention team. We did our job and the campaign did our jobs. Look, the reality is this. We believe that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the polar opposite of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And so throughout the course of this convention, starting on our very first night, we the people, Donald Trump is always making everything about him. We started our convention off talking about the people. Then we went into talking about how leadership matters. And yes, being a good person matters in leadership, but also understanding the stakes, knowing how to work with your allies. Last night, we talked about a more perfect union. And tonight, the promise of America. I'm just very excited for folks to see it. So yes, this is quintessential Joe Biden. And we're glad that came throughout the course of this week. But this is also about the people. This is about the American people. This isn't just about him. And I think that came through as well.
I want to shift gears a little bit to the Trump campaign. Our colleague Alex Eisenstadt scooped last night that they are going up with a digital ad campaign attacking Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, for his business dealings with China and kind of resurfacing some of these past allegations that the Bidens had profited off of his vice presidency. This isn't the first time the campaign has tried to go after Hunter. How do you plan to talk about this or refute this or kind of make sure that this isn't something that dogs the campaign for the next 75 days?
Well, again, we're going to do what we did when we first came up. We're going to call out the lies. We're going to reassert Vice President Biden's position, which is in a Biden administration, his children will not have offices in the West Wing. They will not serve as administration officials. They will uphold, a Biden administration will uphold the policies that the Obama Biden administration upheld as it relates to really ensuring that we're not crossing lines here. The ethics policy, there was a very high ethics bar in the Obama Biden White House. Look, I think the Trump campaign is re-upping these attacks because they have yet to find anything that sticks. The Ukraine did not stick. Saying, that Vice President Biden was corrupt didn't stick. Saying he's not all the way there didn't stick. So they really haven't found an attack that has been able to penetrate and burst the bubble, if you will, and penetrate down to the American people. And so I can't speak to why the Trump campaign is recycling failed attacks and attempts. But what I can say is we're going to be ready to call out these lies and refute them. The American people are watching. They know better.
Follow up on that really quickly. Sorry, Symone, I did not mean to interrupt you. We have, we're working with the technology we have here. So let me just ask you about this. It doesn't seem to me as an observer, and I would think that Anna would agree, that there's no way to stop the president from saying these things. There's no way to, as you said, burst this bubble. Or I just don't get the sense that he's going to, I don't get the sense that he's going to stop. I mean, you don't think you could put those things to rest, it doesn't sound like, but you just have to call them out for what you see the real story is. I mean,
look, it's despicable. And so it's on us to call them out, but it's also on folks in the news media to understand that what President Trump and the Trump campaign are saying about Vice President Biden and his son are nothing but salacious lies. And they should be called out as such. It's a conspiracy theory that was cooked up by Rudy Giuliani. And frankly, it's the basis of something that got the president impeached. So let's just be clear. I think that the news cycle moves so quickly, we seem to forget. But Donald Trump stood on the White House lawn and invited foreign interference into this election. Why? Because he only cares about himself. He is only interested in moving in a way that will benefit him personally or himself and his campaign politically. So it's unfortunate, but I am just so happy that today the American people are going to get to see a real president. They're going to be able to see the potential. And for the next 75 days, we are going to continue to speak directly to the American people about Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris's vision for them, about how we are addressing these three crises that currently exist in America: our public health crisis, our economic crisis, and this crisis of racial justice and this quest for racial equity.
The convention has featured quite a few Republicans. We wrote earlier this week that it almost seemed like Democrats were trying to portray the world as they would like it to be, the kind of past days of yore where Joe Biden would get together with Republicans and deals would come together. You worked for Bernie Sanders. Nearly everyone we speak to suggests that it will be impossible to do what Biden says, work with Republicans, while trying to keep progressives in the fold. What's your sense in terms of actually being able to do that in kind of this bipartisan fashion? Is it a talking point that works, that people want, or is it actually, when you get to Washington, you think it's going to be a reality?
Look, if anybody can do it, I think Joe Biden can. I remember when we rolled out the plank of our Build Back Better plan as it relates to clean energy and infrastructure. And do you know what happened when we rolled out that plan? That plan was lauded from activists in the Sunrise Movement and climate activists, but also that plan was lauded by unions and folks in labor like IBEW and UAW. Why? Because the unions know that Vice President Biden's plan for the economy, for a clean energy economy and an infrastructure, will create good union paying jobs in America. But you know why the climate activists lauded his plan? Well, because they know that Vice President Biden's plan for clean energy economy and infrastructure will help address this existential crisis that is climate change in America. And so only Joe Biden can bring those two factions together. I think he has a proven ability to do that. And look, the reality is that you have to be able to work across the aisle if, in fact, you would like to govern. I think the American people know that. And so Republicans were featured in our convention this week because this is a convention across America. Vice President Biden is running for president, not just to be the president of Democrats or just to be the president of folks that voted for him, but when he is elected, he's going to be the president of everyone and address these issues. And the crises I talked about are not just crises that are affecting Democrats in America. These are crises that are touching all of us as Americans. And it's going to take all of us to really attack them, overcome them, and then build back better.
So you have the captive attention of millions of Americans right now during this convention week. I'm curious how you use surrogates over the next 73 days after this convention is over. People like Hillary Clinton, people like Michelle Obama. What should we expect to see when it comes to surrogates? How do you deploy them with effect during a pandemic?
Well, look, we have had a very robust surrogate operation since the onset of this pandemic, since we've all been relegated to our homes since March of 2020. And I would say our campaign strategy is really even though we are virtual, we are still reaching actual voters. So that means we are convening roundtables, and we are doing happy hours, and we're doing call-ins, and the vice president and Senator Harris are doing virtual rope lines. And you can expect us to continue to step those up. We'll have some numbers that we'll be releasing today about the engagement over the course of this convention, especially last night. We have been having watch parties every night. There are a number of watch parties happening this evening. As we announced earlier this week, we will be doing drive-ins. And so all of this is really a launching pad for these next 75 days. We're not new to deploying surrogates. We're not new to engaging folks in this new normal that is a virtual campaign world. And I think we've been doing a really good job, and we're going to continue that up and through until Election Day, because that's what it's going to take. We are trying to earn every vote in America. And so we are attacking this with meticulous surgical precision, as I like to say. It's state by state, district by district, ensuring that we are reaching people and meeting people where they are.
You know, you kind of illustrated and led this into this next question really well, which is, this is a very different campaign, right? Mm-hmm. You're not seeing Joe Biden work the rope lines or Kamala Harris have to really interact on a daily basis with the press corps, which, you know, 4 years ago, I was in Iowa, I was in New Hampshire. I mean, every day those kinds of those candidates are getting, you know, back and forth with the press. I know in speaking with some of our colleagues, there's been frustration that Biden and Harris have only spoken to a few outlets like Elle, People, ABC. When do you expect them to take more regular questions from the press? Is there going to be a robust back and forth that the candidates have with the fourth estate?
Look, we are no stranger to engaging with the press. Vice President Biden and Senator Harris are sitting down with ABC for their first joint interview, and that will air on Sunday. And yes, you can expect to see them taking additional questions. Look, it is no surprise to folks, and I know lots of our reporters, particularly on our beat, have heard me say this before, but we have prioritized local press in this campaign. No shade to our friends in the national media, but that has been a focus for us. And so every time the vice president or Senator Harris will be traveling into virtual travel into a state, when Dr. Biden is doing events, we always make sure that we are talking to local reporters, outlets, television, print, as well as radio, and we're taking questions, and we are going to continue to do that.
Last question for you, Symone, before we get the hook here. President Trump obviously regularly talks to the press, takes a lot of questions. That's their strategy, and does it at rallies and things like that, and is making the point of today going to Pennsylvania and going across the country. He has gone across the country this week. Something that Tim Kaine told us, he wishes he had spent more time, I'm not quoting him here, but he said generally he wished he'd spent more time doing joint events with Hillary Clinton in 2016. Could you just forecast a little bit for us what the rest of the campaign will look like from a live event perspective?
Well, look, we're going to be nimble. Obviously, we are responding, and just like we are right now. I mean, usually this event would be in person. We'd be on stage together in Milwaukee, but due to COVID-19, we are together here virtually. And so we're going to listen to the scientists. We are going to let the experts lead us, and we are going to do what's safe. But you're going to see a whole lot of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris over these next 75 days. We're going to leave it all on the field. We're not taking anything for granted here. And we are looking forward to tonight in convention. I know the Republicans have their week next week. And then before you know it, y'all, we'll be at a debate. And Vice President Biden, he will be there. Now, Donald Trump has yet to commit to all three of the debates, but Vice President Biden has, and we look forward to seeing folks on that debate stage.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Symone, for being with us this morning on what is I'm sure, very busy day. Plug In with Playbook is going to continue now.
Let's kick it over to senior politics editor Charlie Mahtesian and national political correspondent Natasha Korecki, who will take us through another edition of the new swing state map. Today's focus is on the great state of Wisconsin, which has a great beer, Spotted Cow. Wish we were there drinking it, but we'll listen to Charlie instead.
Good morning. I'm Charlie Mahtesian, senior politics editor at Politico. The electoral map has changed quite a bit thanks to the architecture of President Trump's 2016 victory, and we're here to talk about one of the key states today. I'm joined by my colleague, national political correspondent Natasha Korecki to explore the new swing states map that will shape the 2020 presidential outcome. Throughout the two political conventions, we'll take a look at a total of 6 states that are at the heart of the electoral map that Donald Trump has reshaped.
Today, we're focusing on Wisconsin. I'm based out of the Chicago area, so just right over the border. I've been covering the 2020 race as well as Iowa and Wisconsin over the last couple of years. Most recently in April, I was in Milwaukee reporting on a pretty surreal primary election that happened during one of the worst weeks of the COVID pandemic. But before we dive into Wisconsin, Politico video journalist Eugene Daniels is providing us some background into the dynamics at play in the state.
Hold on. There's a big old call to make. Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin.
This is a state that Hillary Clinton hasn't even visited since the Democratic convention over the summer.
Losing Wisconsin in 2016 was the crystallizing moment that things had gone south for Democrats. By a super slim margin of 22,000 votes, President Trump was the first Republican to win the state in more than 30 years, sending a jolt through the left. That jolt brought to life all types of different activist groups across the left that realized they had become complacent that year. Something the party and group say they aren't doing again. When I spoke with Jared Lawness of Swing Left pre-COVID, he explained voters were knocking doors earlier than usual to prove it.
All the volunteers that are all working together in the Democratic Party sort of infrastructure are kind of building the campaign and waiting. So whoever wins this 20-person contest will sort of be able to come in and inherit a mobilized, organized, motivated, highly driven group of volunteers.
Wisconsin used to be a power center of the Republican Party, but it's taken some big dings. Governor Scott Walker was an up-and-coming party leader. Gone. Paul Ryan was the Speaker of the House. Gone. But Ryan retired.
I have given this job everything that I have.
And Walker lost his re-election.
So no way do I see it as a rejection.
And earlier this year, a conservative state Supreme Court justice lost his seat by more than 100,000 votes. And Democrats are really excited about that. But out of the big Rust Belt swing states, Wisconsin is still the toughest battleground for Democrats who want to build up that big blue wall. And here's why. First, demographics. Compared to Pennsylvania and Michigan, Wisconsin has more white people. And in 2018, white voters without a college degree in Wisconsin hit 55%, about 10 points higher than the other two. Both of those groups largely make up President Trump's base. In 2018, Democrats did win all 5 statewide races, but by very narrow margins, including the gubernatorial race by just about 1 point. For comparison, Democrats won governorships by double digits in Michigan and Pennsylvania. This gives Democrats less room for error. One of the big key areas for both major parties is going to be the wow suburbs and how they perform. That's Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington counties. Get it? Wow. They surround Milwaukee, are primarily white, and are generally the most Republican. There's been softening of Republican support there, but not in the same way we've seen in other suburbs around the country. The current Wisconsin poll average shows Joe Biden about 6 points ahead of Donald Trump, which is basically where Hillary Clinton was at this same point in early August in 2016.
Natasha, you spent a good bit of time in Wisconsin over the past few years, whether it's on assignment to cover the election or for vacation or even a cheese run. Of course, Hillary Clinton famously never made it to Wisconsin in 2016, and her failure to campaign there is widely believed to have cost her the state in an election that was ultimately decided by less than 23,000 votes. When Democrats talk about 2016, the Wisconsin loss often seems like it was the bitterest pill to swallow.
That's exactly right, Charlie. If there's one state that keeps Tom Perez up at night, it's Wisconsin. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Democrats completely blundered Wisconsin in 2016. They should have been shoring up their base in the Midwest, but they were playing in places like Arizona, trying to run up the score. Since then, National Democrats basically parked themselves in Wisconsin and never left. And so far, it's paying off. We've seen Democrats make gains over the midterms when they ended Scott Walker's longtime reign in Wisconsin. We saw more hints of it in April when Democrats won a fiercely fought state Supreme Court race. And in what Democrats see as a positive signal for November, their vote by mail operation was far superior to what Republicans were able to pull off in April.
The Republican suburbs surrounding Milwaukee, as you know, are typically essential to the Republican hopes of winning the state. They voted for President Trump in 2016, but they weren't really wild about him, and he seems to be flagging there again this year. How much of a problem is that for his chances of winning the state?
Well, it's a big problem. It's a really troubling sign for Trump. You know, he needs to run up the margins in suburbs around Green Bay and Milwaukee, including in the counties of Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington. As you well know, they're the WOW counties. These are reservoirs of Republican votes where if you're running statewide as a Republican in Wisconsin, you don't just win the WOW counties, you have to dominate them to help offset the Democratic bastions in Madison and Milwaukee. But the trends really aren't looking good for Trump in these areas. Republican support here has been softening, and independents who can be pivotal in a razor-thin election have been trending toward Joe Biden.
So here's a surprising stat for you. Well, you probably already know it, but it's still pretty interesting anyway. There were 206 counties across the country that voted for Donald Trump in 2016 after twice voting for Barack Obama. And of those counties, 23 of them were in Wisconsin. Only one state, Iowa, had more of these so-called pivot counties. How important do you think these places were to Donald Trump's victory in Wisconsin, and what explains his appeal in these kinds of places?
Well, these counties that swung from Obama to Trump were critical to Trump's victory in Wisconsin. I mean, many of these counties are located in the southwestern part of the state. They're made up of blue-collar, predominantly white voters, and they were feeling left behind by the economy. They twice voted for Obama, only to swing back to Trump, in some cases by more than 10 points. Trump's appeal was that he promised to shake up Washington and fix the economy. Now support is still strong for Trump in these areas when it comes to the economy, but Democrats are messaging hard on unemployment in Wisconsin and the fact that so many dairy farms have gone out of business in the state over the last several years. And Trump is losing ground on issues like his handling on coronavirus. And one thing that's really different than 2016 is and I find this really interesting, in one recent focus group study I saw, Joe Biden is largely undefined by voters. Believe it or not, that's what 30 years in politics will get you. So he's not offensive to them. And that's an opening for Democrats, because in 2016, Hillary Clinton's favorability was completely underwater here. And she was beyond defined to these voters. She was despised by them.
Wow, he's not offensive to them. That is, hardly sounds like a campaign slogan. In any case, we've only got a limited amount of time left, so let's do a lightning round of questions. So here's the first one. If there's one thing the Trump campaign must do to win Wisconsin, what would it be?
I think there's probably two things. And one is Trump must have a 2016 repeat and do exceptionally well in the rural parts of the state. This is where he won 63% of the vote. He really dominated, and he needs to do that again. And the second thing is he needs to drive up the margins in those WOW counties and win back any independents who are starting to drift away from him. So, Charlie, let me ask you the same question. What about the Biden campaign? What does Biden have to do to win back Wisconsin?
I guess I'd say Uncle Joe needs to win big margins out of Milwaukee and also out of Dane County, which is home to Madison and the University of Wisconsin. On election night, I'll also be watching to see if he can claw back some of those Obama-Trump counties. And I think it's also important for Biden to hold down Trump's margins in the Milwaukee suburbs. I mean, that shouldn't be too hard given their coolness toward Trump. But if Biden is perceived as breaking too hard to the left or is seen as too liberal, that's not going to help his cause in those so-called conservative WOW counties that you mentioned earlier.
Right. Okay, well, with that, thank you all for joining us for this new swing states map focusing on Wisconsin.
We have 3 more states to go in the new swing states map. Join us during our coverage of the Republican National Convention as we take a look at Arizona, Florida, and North Carolina. Thanks for watching and take care.
morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Scola, and I'm a senior technology reporter at Politico. The Democratic National Convention made history this week as the first U.S. presidential nominee convention to be held completely virtually. So 5 months into the coronavirus pandemic, the Democratic Party was forced to reimagine how to both convene party leaders and reach voters in an all-virtual format, all during one of the most consequential elections in recent memory. And it's not too much to say that the road from this month's nominating conventions to the White House runs right through the internet. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined by Caitlin Mitchell, who is a senior advisor for digital for the campaign of the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. We're going to talk this morning with Caitlin about how she and the Biden campaign are thinking about everything from digital organizing to online fundraising to using social media in their bid to make Joe Biden the next president. You can follow the conversation on social media using the hashtag DNC with Politico, and please tweet us your questions at @Politico. With that, let's get started. Welcome, Caitlin.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us. So, Caitlin, you joined the Biden campaign in May, but let's jump back a little bit to the primary season.
Sure.
The Biden campaign, excellent. The Biden campaign developed a bit of a reputation for having a little bit of a slow start when it came to its digital operation. And then the pandemic hit, and then there were the now famous videos of Vice President Biden live from his basement, broadcasting live from his basement. At the time, there was a lot of unsolicited advice about how the campaign could improve its digital operation. Were those criticisms fair? And if so, what did the campaign learn from them?
Yeah, I think that the Biden campaign, and once VP Biden became the presumptive nominee, you know, there were a lot of challenges with the pandemic happening right around that time. This is something that I was experiencing at the same time before I joined the campaign, while working for Senator Warren's political organization. And so I think it was much less about what they were and weren't doing, and much more about everyone collectively figuring out how we adjust to a world that is fully online and virtual. And so when I came on board, it was the beginning of May, and I met around 2025 very talented, very tired digital staffer. I started working with Rob Flaherty, the digital director for the Biden campaign, and he was more than ready to hire. And from there, we just started building a plan. How are we going to scale? Where are the areas that we want to build out? How do we want to build this thing for the general election? Fast forward to August, and our digital team is now over 100 people, and will be close to 150 when we're all wrapped. And so we've really completely changed the game in terms of the folks we're bringing on and just our capacity.
And I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, that was all.
When you compare those numbers, 25 people at the start, 150 you'll have soon, how does that compare to the Warren operation or past campaigns you've been a part of?
Yeah. Where we are now is pretty comparable to where Hillary HFA was at in 2016. Also, I was on the Obama 2012 campaign, so pretty similar to where we were in 2012 as well. And I think the biggest thing that you get when you hire out and scale, which is something that I've done in a number of roles, is that you really get folks to specialize. Instead of everyone having, one main job and a few side hustles, folks can really focus on social platforms, building out folks who are dedicated to what is the tenor and what are the analytics that really drive the audience on each individual social platform. Same thing for fundraising. There are a lot of fundraising platforms that we are just seeing amazing fundraising numbers on that are beyond the traditional platforms of, say, a website or your email list. So for SMS, for social media, just hiring out folks who can focus on that all the time. And I think you've seen in our fundraising numbers the last few months, in particular our grassroots fundraising numbers, it really does make a world of difference.
One big fundraising moment the campaign recently had was the rollout of Senator Kamala Harris as the VP nominee last week. It was a pretty, by pretty much all accounts, it was a pretty remarkable rollout. There was no leak, which was striking, before the email announcing her went out. You fundraised, I don't know how much of it was online, but you fundraised $25 million within the first 24 hours, which is pretty striking. Can you take us inside the sort of digital component of that rollout?
Yeah. So we started planning for the rollout of her, is what we referred to. We knew that it would be a woman, so who she would be, we did not know. But we started planning for the rollout probably late June, early July. And as we got closer to when the announcement came, what we did essentially was build out what I believe is an unprecedented amount of content preparing for any of the 11 finalists that were on the VP's list. And so for the email, social media, ads, logo that you saw us roll out for Kamala Harris, we had that times 11. I think Jenna Lowenstein, who is the digital director for HFA and 16, talked about them doing that for 4. So first, it was just really an incredible thing to be part of, and incredible to see the team really step up and just be prepared. And you know, folks know this, a big key of rapid response in big moments is just being prepared for any of the scenarios. So that was thing 1. I'd say thing 2 is that we were brought in from the very start and asked to pitch our best ideas of how do we make this digital first. Essentially, we were, you know, we had a big meeting. Yeah, we were said, you know, we're going to have a big meeting, bring your best ideas. And that was where our idea came from, to actually film VP Biden calling the nominee and offering her the job. In discussing that, we realized, we're like, what does that actually sound like? What does that feel like? How cool would that be if we could show our supporters what the actual moment in the room feels like when someone is called up and asked to serve?
We're going to take a look at the clip of that call that you mentioned. There was a video that went on Twitter, other social platforms, of VP Biden calling Senator Harris to offer her the spot. When you and I were getting ready for this interview, we talked about how Joe Biden has a certain voice, both online and off. Joe Biden is not a sarcastic guy. You mentioned he doesn't dunk on people. How do you go about building a social media presence around a candidate like Joe Biden, who isn't like a natural sort of social media voice? And I think we might pull up a clip but please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, for us, I mean, there's really our job is to take his voice and make it as authentic as possible online. We want to show online what Joe Biden will look like as president. And that means showing that he provides steady leadership, showing the warmth that he naturally exudes day to day in interacting with folks, and really showing the empathy that he brings to the table, and which is such a stark contrast to President Trump. And so those are baked into our voice. No, Joe Biden doesn't go around dunking on folks in real life every day. And so it just doesn't make sense for us to do that online. So being the best version of him and the most authentic version of him is really what we work towards every day.
And let's talk a little bit, you mentioned President Trump. One of the things, I think by his own admission, is his voice online is no holds barred. He will tweet just about anything. A lot of his supporters are pretty rough and tumble on the internet. How do you think about competing with that in the next 75 days?
Yeah, I mean, we're fully aware that making folks angry or outraged is a very powerful motivator. It helps move things online. And we've seen that for the past 4 years. From the very beginning, it was clear to us that we weren't going to take that tack. We were going to show what leadership looks like live every day. As part of that, we're going to show some of the fun side of Joe Biden, a little bit more about him, a little bit more of the personal side of him, a little bit more about his relationship with Dr. Jill Biden. And so for us, it wasn't even a question of, we would rather take a little less engagement on some days, without having to stoop to that level or play that same game. What we've seen is that in the times that we are in, there's an enormous desire for feel-good content, or for what we call online wholesome content. Folks really like that, and it connects. And when you take a look at our video views, particularly in the last month or two, you can see they're moving around the internet pretty well. And so our supporters seem to agree.
You mentioned the fun side of Joe Biden. Is he aware of any of the memes about him washing his Trans Am, anything like that?
Yes. Actually, he is, and he loves it, and he leans into that. He knows about him washing the Trans Am, the onion version of Joe Biden. What's funny is that as we saw in the video of him and the Corvette that was given to him by his father, that he likes old cars. And he also likes aviators. He's been wearing them since his teens. And so you can either lean away from that or lean in. We've definitely chosen to lean in because it's part of who he is.
Okay. So right now we're 75 days out. I mentioned, we are all fixated on a handful of swing states, right? So places like Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan. Joe Biden needs to win some of those if he wants to be the next president. You can't go knock on doors in the suburbs of Detroit the way you once might have to rally voters and bring folks out to the polls. How do you think about using digital to target folks specifically in those swing states?
Yeah, this is something that we are working on all day, every day, and thinking about how we reach these voters. Part of how we are doing this is that in the last few months, we have started a brand new digital organizing team that is very robust. Part of it is focused on distributed organizing. So that is taking supporters who want to volunteer who don't live in swing states, training them up, and then having them call or text in to help bring other volunteers on board. But really, we did a lot of thinking of what does it look like in the time of COVID in a battleground state when we're not going to be knocking on doors. We had to decide what our new North Star was. And for us, it was clear to us that, the reason that we have leaned on canvassing so much in the past is that we know that substantive conversations with voters changes minds, moves them, motivates them to vote. So for us, it's the same simple organizing best practices that we are still using, but the tools are different. So for us, our North Star is going to be calls. How many calls can we make? The last thing I'll say is that in our battleground states, we are being really intentional about building out our volunteer efforts in state. And that means, in every state, people are living different realities right now, depending on their governor, because of COVID, because of the times that we're in. And so really building out a well-trained volunteer army in each battleground state is critical, not just for persuasion and getting out the word, but also for voter education, which, as we all know, is going to look very different than it has in any other election before this.
And so we've talked about the swing states. What about specifically targeting the parts of the coalition that Joe Biden is also probably going to need to turn out in order to win? So I'm thinking about backers of Senator Bernie Sanders or disaffected Republicans. We've seen the Lincoln Project, for example, is a group of disaffected Republicans who have been pretty aggressive online. How do you think about connecting to those folks using digital and bringing them into the fold?
Yeah, our take is that anyone who wants to help elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and defeat Donald Trump, we are welcome to create a place for them online. And then we will probably ask them to make calls or send texts and to participate in voter contact. How that looks like in the states is we actually have coalition staffers working closely with digital organizing staff to make sure that, one, we're creating a space for communities online to gather. Many volunteers are used to going to a field office or having community events. How do we create or recreate that space online? For us, a lot of that work is being done over Slack. Slack is the new field office. And so we are creating a space and then working closely with our coalitions team to make sure that we are creating content that is culturally competent, that makes sense to those communities, and that we are organizing in those communities, even if it might be primarily happening online, much in the same way that we would if this was a general regular election.
Okay. Looking forward to the next few months before Election Day, one of the things that we've already seen happen in this cycle is manipulated media circulating on social media platforms. So Twitter and Facebook, for example, some of that's been related to Joe Biden. There's a video that went around that was clipped to make him look like he was maybe endorsing Donald Trump. There was also a video that went around of Speaker Pelosi that was slowed to make it look like she was slurring her words. How much do you worry that something like that goes around as some sort of October surprise right before Election Day? And what's the game plan for dealing with something like that?
Yeah, I mean, manipulated media, whether you're using Twitter edits or making someone look like they're saying something that they're not, since the beginning of the internet. So that isn't new to us. What is new is that we are working very closely with the DNC. They have a whole disinformation team in which they both monitor very closely emerging trends that begin to come up online. They surface them to the Biden campaign. This is something they did when I worked for Senator Warren in the primary, something they did for all the primary candidates too, of making sure campaigns know what are the emerging narratives. They work closely with the social media companies to try to remove the ones that clearly break the guidelines of the social media platforms. The second thing that we're doing is really working on flooding the zone with positive content too. Like that is a part of disinformation, is making sure how are we empowering supporters to share great content. And so, especially in our battleground states, we're doing a lot of really interesting work with Facebook groups. And that isn't like the Joe Biden for Florida Facebook group. That is, what are the political groups? What are the Facebook groups that already exist? Making sure that we have organizers showing up, saying hello, introducing themselves to the administrators of this group, and helping organize in those communities to help spread positive word, positive content about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
So those can be community groups related to any sort of hobbies, community, any sort of community events.
A lot of them tend to be political.
Okay.
A lot of them have been county political groups. I think one in Wisconsin that we were talking about. I hate Scott Walker. Still very active in Wisconsin. So just getting to know the folks who are running that and working with them in a partnership of how we get the word out.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Thank you for joining us for Plug In with Playbook. It was great having you. To me, what really stood out from our conversation is, as I mentioned at the start, how much of this next 75 days is going to be playing out online and how critical the digital operation is to that. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on that. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's turn it back to Jake and Anna.
All right. Thanks so much, Nancy. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in to Plug In with Playbook.
We will be back during the Republican convention with more coverage starting at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, August 25th, right here on Politico.com.
We are still working to nail down some big name guests, so please stay tuned on that, but we should have some announcements in the coming days.
Yes, we will. They're going to be big names, the biggest names. Before we wrap up the week, join Politico Chief Economic Correspondent Ben White this afternoon at 1 p.m. on Politico.com for a panel on how a Joe Biden administration should approach economic policies if he wins in November. Don Beyer, the vice chair of the Joint Economic Committee, Jared Bernstein, chief economic advisor to Vice President Joe Biden, and Heidi Schertholz, the former chief economist with the Labor Department under the Obama administration, will join the conversation. Thank you and take care.
Hey, my name's Eugene Daniels. I'm the host of Foursquare, Politico's digital video show with Tim Alberta, Laura Barron-Lopez, and Ryan Lizza. During the convention, we'll be getting together to provide lots of analysis.
I think it strikes a lot of Republicans that Trump's only chance to get back into this race is if Democrats really do him a favor, if they really overreach.
Context.
It's not a new playbook for Trump, and it's also not a new playbook historically.
Also kind of amazing that the conventional wisdom that the person who would be best for Biden is an African-American woman.
And lots of lively discussion.
Goes over time and doesn't answer the question.
Who is it, Ryan?
It's the person who will help him govern.
No, give us a name. No, they had to pick a name.
Join us live tonight at 8:30 Eastern, covering today's big political news, the speeches, and everything else, giving you lots of anxiety nowadays.